Alright, so now we're going to talk about delivery, how to actually deliver your speech, how to put the finishing touches on what words to say, what words to use to communicate your speech. That's a really, you have to be able to effectively communicate the message. We're going to talk about three things. First of all, we're going to talk about how to be conversational, some general delivery tips, and then delivery trills, some things that you can work on to be more effective in delivering your message. Alright, let's start off with how to be conversational. I'm going to go over 5 things here. First of all, don't use jargon. A lot of us use terms that are considered to be jargon, that are considered to be terms that are only understood by a select amount of people or only understood by certain people. For instance, sometimes we can get used to using terms that are really super Christian. Like, not many of you guys have probably heard the term propitiation used outside of a church until I just used it right now. So that would fall into an instance of Christian jargon. It would be in that super special language known as Christianese, in a sense. Sometimes we get used to using those terms. We get used to using terms that are super Christian, and because of that, we can alienate people who are trying to come at it from a skeptical perspective, so to speak, as a lot of your judges are. So if you are going to use jargon, make sure that you explain it really well in apologetics. So if you say propitiation, here's what propitiation means, and here's how propitiation manifests itself, then you can do that. I try to stay away from jargon at all costs in Mars Hill because it's super conversational, but it's okay to do a little in APOL as long as you explain what you mean. Also, this is something that I see a lot, which is why I bring it up. Don't refer to Christians as us or we. Talk about your faith. Talk about what matters to you. Now, I'm not saying that everything is about you, but what I am saying is you shouldn't refer to our faith, or the faith that we have as Christians, or what we believe and why you should listen to us. Talk about you. Say, this is my faith. This is what I believe. This is what I want to communicate to you. Again, like I talked about yesterday, don't institutionalize Christianity, because if you institutionalize Christianity, that will take away from the impact of your speech. So don't use jargon. Don't refer to Christians as us. Talk about your faith. Using jargon can alienate your audience, which is generally unadvisable. It can alienate your audience. It can make sure that your audience is no longer following your speech. They're no longer curious. They're no longer listening to what you're saying because you are alienating them. That is not a very good idea. I would generally recommend not alienating your audience. That's usually bad. This can also apply to speech jargon as well, like the term roadmap. A lot of people, when you say the word roadmap, aren't thinking, oh, it's a speech roadmap. They're thinking like an actual roadmap that you take out and never know how to fold back together, and then your grandparents get mad at you for not being able to fold it back together. Like one of those things. So be careful with using speech jargon in your speeches too. Make sure that it's understandable to the common man. The second thing you can do is speak with varied intensity. Speak with a variance of how much intensity you put into something, how much energy you put into it, whether or not you're super intense, leaning forward, communicating to them, or more laid back, more chill, and just trying to talk to them, communicate things to them. Sometimes a high-intensity speech can distract from your message. Sometimes, if you're really intense, it can take away from that conversational tone. If you're standing up there and you're just screaming or shouting at a judge like, you are going to hell because you are a sinner, a judge usually isn't going to view that as very conversational, very open, or very relatable. So a high-intensity speech is going to distract from your message, and you don't want to do that. You want your message to shine through, so be very careful that your high-intensity speech doesn't distract. So vary your intensity a little bit. Being conversational can take the form of being a little more laid back and a little bit less intense. Sometimes it's okay to just take a step back, just be a little bit more laid back, be a little bit more chill in how you're talking. Don't necessarily use super intense vocabulary, super good vocabulary, I guess. Use good vocabulary, but don't use like really complex vocabulary. Step back, take down the energy level a little bit so you're just talking to them. Be a little bit more chill in how you're communicating. Finally, get high intensity if necessary. If you really want to emphasize a point, if you really want to hammer something home, then it is okay to specifically, for a very intentional purpose, get a little more high intensity, get a little more high energy, but I would recommend for the most part staying away from being really intense because then you can scare a lot of judges, and scaring judges usually isn't a good way to get higher ranks on a ballot. Alright, thirdly, you want to have rough polish. Now Now, to some of you guys, this might not make much sense because they seem to be two diametrically opposed concepts. Seemingly, when you have a rough speech and when you have a polished speech, those are two opposing concepts. What I am proposing to you is you have a little bit of rough polish as you go through your speech. Now, it's great if you sound really polished in a speech, but some can interpret it wrong. Some can actually, if you have a very polished approach or a very formal approach, can knock you down because they don't feel you're being conversational. They do not feel like you are communicating to them at their level. They feel you're too polished and too high up, so to speak. If you're too polished, you can actually remind the judge that you're giving a speech. If your A-Pol speech sounds like a platform, then judges are going to be like, oh, okay, this is a speech. Somebody's giving a speech to me. It's not a conversation. They're not trying to communicate something to me. So if you're too polished, it can remind the judge that you're giving a speech, and again, that is not advisable. So rough up your polish a little bit, but do so intentionally. Do so with a purpose, trying to accomplish a very specific thing. For instance, you might use some more laid-back vocabulary. Like instead of talking about propitiation, you might say, look, God saves us, he offers himself as a sacrifice. It's not apparent that you're being a little more rough, but it's a little more rough than using super polished phrases like propitiation. So add a little bit of roughness, add a little bit of texture into your speech. It's kind of like a good soup. A good soup isn't just like a puree of stuff that's basically like drinking a smoothie. It has a little bit of texture in it, it has a little bit of feeling in it. Make sure that your speeches have a little bit of texture in them as well. Fourthly, you want to impact it out. You want to impact what you're saying. You want to show why what you're saying actually matters for a judge and for you as well. Make sure you explain why things matter so you're not just talking about things. If you're just standing up there talking about things, just saying words, people are going to be able to tell and they're not really going to be compelled by what you're saying. Make sure you impact things out, make sure you show why things matter so you have the ability to be convincing and compelling. Also, judges will assume that you're more conversational if you're more impactful, and here's why. If you explain why things matter, judges will feel more personally involved. They feel like they actually have a reason to be in that conversation, like they have a reason to be listening to what you're saying. If you personally involve the judge, then that completes the other half of the conversation, so to speak. So you will be a lot more conversational if you have the ability to impact out what you're saying and explain why what you're saying matters. If you don't impact, judges are more likely to feel alienated. If you don't explain why something matters to a judge is going to sit there like, okay, I don't really care because it doesn't really affect me whatsoever. You don't want that. That is generally not good if a judge doesn't care about your speech. If you impact it, a judge will care and they will see you as being more conversational because of it. Fifthly, care about your audience. Caring about your audience was, I think, one of the best things, one of the greatest tips that I learned when I was trying to figure out how to be conversational. The first 2 years, I wasn't at all, and it was really frustrating for me. I'm an A-Pol in Mars Hill. I didn't know what that word meant. Once I started thinking about caring about my audience, it was something that helped me to be a lot more conversational. When it comes to being conversational, just care about your audience. Care about what they think. Care about their opinion. Care whether or not you're communicating something well. If you are communicating something well, it'll usually be because you want them to actually understand that concept. You want them to actually understand what you're talking about, and that gives you a lot more power and potency behind what you're saying. Try to communicate for them, not for your own sake. You're going to be least effective in speaking when you're just communicating for you. When you're not communicating to actually help people understand stuff, but you're just standing up saying words because you have to. That's not going to be the time when you're most compelling. That's not going to be the time when you're most conversational either. If you care about your audience, you're going to be more conversational. If you can look into somebody's eyes and say, I really want you to understand what I am saying, it will help you to be conversational because you really care about what they are thinking, about what process they use to get to a conclusion. You really care about making sure that your message is being received well. So let's move on to some general tips on delivery. Let's move on to some things that you guys should keep in mind when you're standing up trying to think about how you want to deliver your speech. First of all, don't overuse your card. Don't overuse the card that you have. You're going to have an index card in front of you, but don't overuse that. Don't use that card as a crutch. Your card can be invasive if it's not used in its proper place. If you're just constantly reading off your card, people are going to be able to tell that you have a card, and they're going to say, oh, he has a card. All my attention is now going to that card instead of going to him and his speech. It can be invasive. It can distract from the purpose that you're trying to accomplish in your speech. Refer to your card, but don't appear like you're reading from it. It's okay to refer from your card, even read scriptures from your card. Sorry about that. But don't look like you're reading. Just don't look like you're reading your entire speech off your card, or that your card is there and you couldn't survive if you didn't have your card. Think of your card as more of a supplement than a crutch. Don't rely on your card and allow it to become invasive. Your delivery will be more natural and organic if it's from you, not from your card. If you're looking at a judge, if you're looking into their eyes, and you're trying to communicate something to them, it is going to be more natural, it's going to be more organic than it might have been had you just been reading off of a card. You can say the same words with the same inflection, the same pausing, the same delivery, but if you're looking at your card instead of looking at your judge, it's going to be less effective. Second thing, variety is key. Variety is key when you're learning how to deliver a speech well, and variety is pivotal in making sure that your message is received well and is interesting and compelling for a judge. Vary things like your volume, your pace, your pitch, your inflection, your intensity. Also, you can vary your pausing. Make sure that you're just instituting some variety, that everything isn't just the same over and over and over again. Make sure that you vary your delivery and vary your volume, everything you want to vary. If there's something that you want to think about while you're giving a speech, think about a way to vary that thing. This variety will help keep a judge engaged and will draw emphasis. It will help keep a judge engaged in what you're saying. It will help keep your audience engaged in what you're saying. And will also draw interest and emphasis to the points you want to. If you pause and really emphasize a certain part by varying your volume and your pitch in that section, people are going to be able to tell that that is a really important point that you really want to focus on. So variety is really key in communicating effectively. With that being said, don't vary it too much. Know the place of certain speaking types. I'm not saying that in every speech you have to both speak loud and soft, that in every speech you have to both end your sentences up and down, that in every speech you have to both talk fast and slow. All I'm saying is have each of them be like tools in your tool belt. Be able to use the right one and the right situation to effectively communicate a message. Don't always use a screwdriver when a hammer might be better. So make sure that you vary what tools you're using when you're delivering. Thirdly, I want you guys to keep in mind that you're talking with a judge, you're not talking at them. You're not talking at a judge, you're not just there talking for the sake of talking. What you're doing is you're talking for the sake of somebody understanding it. Don't talk at your judge, just talk with them. Talk with them, try to make them understand what you're saying. The times when I'm the least effective and the least compelling speaker is when nobody's really paying attention, and times when I'm just saying words because I have to say words and I'm not really trying to communicate anything to anyone. The best times when I speak, the times when I'm most compelling, is when I talk with somebody. Like I talk like I'm trying to get them to understand, they're engaged, they're paying attention, and that gives me the ability to deliver more effectively. Try to communicate a message to them, don't just talk. Usually standing up in front of people and just talking about something isn't compelling. It's going to be boring for everyone involved. It's going to be boring for you, so just don't do it. Try to communicate with them. Try to have them understand that. Look for when it might seem like they're glazing over or they're not really paying attention much, and try to engage even more with them then. Try to communicate a message, don't just say words. Finally, in communication, you are responsible for the impact your message has. I'm going to say this right now. What you say does not matter. How you say it does not matter. The only thing that matters is the impact that it has on your audience. The only thing that matters about speaking is how it is received. So it doesn't matter if you think you've done something. It doesn't matter if you think you've been conversational. It doesn't matter if you think you said something or communicated something. If you haven't, that is entirely on you. All of the accountability, all of the responsibility falls on you for not communicating that effectively. Your job when you're communicating is to effectively show somebody and make them understand. If you're talking at them, if you're just saying words, you're not going to do that. The only way you can do that is by effectively talking with them. All right, the fourth thing is to develop your style. Developing your style is one of the most important parts of developing your delivery. If you do not have your style, if your style is not put together, then you are not going to have the ability to speak effectively and to communicate with solid delivery. A lot of delivery is personal and is entirely dependent on you. Your delivery style is going to depend on who you are, how you think, how you process things, and how you like to speak. Now, I've given you some tips, but all of these are subjective based upon your personal style. I know I'm a very intellectual, I'm a very analytical person, and so for the most part, I will usually communicate by just talking about ideas. I'll think about communicating ideas instead of communicating emotions. That means that my delivery is going to be different than somebody who might be more emotional in how they process the world. A lot of delivery is going to be personal, and that is entirely dependent on you. So you have to figure out what your style is, what your personal style is, and be able to deliver in that context. Find out your personal style and what works for you. If it works for you, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work for somebody else. It doesn't matter if people think you're stupid for doing it. If it works for you, if you communicate a message well, then it doesn't really matter. That's all you need. All you need to do is communicate an effective message to your audience. If you do that, it doesn't really matter how you do that. Make sure you stay in the guidelines. Something transcend your style. For the first couple of years, I thought, I didn't need to be conversational because that just wasn't my speaking style. That wasn't my personal style. That's not true. There are some things that you have to do regardless of your style. You have to be conversational regardless of your style, regardless of your personal style. You just have to figure out how to accomplish that within your personal style. So develop your style and use that to instruct you.